Hello and welcome to this Blender Masterclass from zero to hero. Are you ready to learn 3D? And right now it's absolutely free. You're not going to pay for very complicated 3D software like Maya or Max. We're going to use Blender, which is absolutely free for everybody. You can just download it, install it, and run it from scratch. What we're going to be covering in this course is we're going to start by learning all the interfaces in Blender, different interfaces, different tools, and everything about the Blender interface and menus. Then we're going to deep dive and continue on by learning all the process of modeling, all the tools of modeling, and we're going to continue on with some texturing stuff, with UV mapping, animation, rendering, etc. So by the end of this course, you're going to be able to create fully alone scenes like this. You're going to have the complete skill to work and create scenes for videos, for movies, for games. Through the whole process of learning in this course, you're going to have to exercise a lot. After each lecture, you're going to need to practice the things that I taught you, and this is the only way to master Blender. So if you stay with me until the end of this course, I can guarantee you on 100% that you will be comfortable with Blender. You can unleash your imagination and create a lot of cool and interesting 3D art. I'm going to update this course weekly because Blender and the industry are changing a lot month by month, and I'm going to be staying up to the trends of different tools, different techniques, etc. So keep in mind that this course will be updated a lot, and check it often if you already watch all the lectures. Thank you guys for watching my introduction, and let's get started and turn you into a 3D professional. Hello and welcome to this part. In this part, we're gonna download Blender. So open Google, type Blender, and it will be the first link, blender.org. So it will redirect you to the Blender website. From here, you can see which is the last version they've released officially. It's Blender 2.9. And from this blue button, download Blender, you can just click on it and redirects you to the download page. Let me show you a little bit down. Here you can see the Blender news, the developer blog, and a little description about everything in Blender: the cycle rendering, the modeling, the sculpting, the UVs, visual effects, animation and rigging, the creation of a 2D drawing in the 3D space, color corrections and stuff like that. Keep in mind that Blender is completely free. The whole program is completely free. So if you want to donate some money to the developers, you can do it by clicking on this button. If you don't, let's go ahead and download Blender. Just click on it and it will redirect me to the download page. In this page, when I click the blue button, I'm going to download Blender. It's 161 megabytes, and I'm downloading the version for Windows. If you're working on Mac, you just need to choose the Mac operations system. So let's click on this button, and a pop-up will appear. Just save the file and wait to be downloaded. Let me show you a few other useful sections in this Blender website. Go to the support, and here you can have access to the documentation, tutorials, community, frequently asked questions, report a bug, or contact professional support from Blender. Let me show you in the download sections few things. If you go to the download and demo files, you can download some created scenes in Blender, which you can just open in Blender and analyze that, how they are created, check out the quality of details, and just learn from them. You can download all these scenes for free. The next tab is the requirements. This is very important to have a good computer for it. It doesn't need too much, but it's a decent one. If you are in the recommended settings, you're gonna need at least 16 gigabytes of RAM and 4 gigabytes of video RAM. So keep in mind that the recommended settings are good, and enough for working in Blender. But if you are working on very high sophisticated models and scenes, you're gonna need to upgrade your system and use the optimal settings. Here you can read about the support of the graphics cards. And let me show you one last thing. Click on the long-term support. What this tab means is, if you noticed, we are downloading Blender 2.9, and 2.9 is this orange over here. So LTS means lifetime support, and what this means is that the version 2.83 will have a support for 2 years. So right now we are downloading the version 2.9, which is a new one, and it will need to be patched to 2.93 LTS, and from that standpoint it will be supported for 2 long years. So keep this in mind, that if you download a version like this, you're gonna need to patch it 3 times before it gets into LTS version. This is important for a big project and future project, to keep in mind how long your Blender version will be supported. So that's it, and I've already downloaded the Blender. Just click on the file, click OK, and let's install. Just click next, accept the terms of service. If you want, you can read them. Click next, choose a location on your computer where to be installed. By default is on C, program files, Blender. Just click next, click install. The installation process will start. So Blender is very small program, but it has super powerful features, and it will install pretty fast, just like that. All right. So the next step is to click on your Windows button, type Blender, and we're gonna open Blender. This is the Blender window. It has a lot of stuff that we're gonna be covering everything, so don't worry about it. The first thing you're gonna need to do is choose your language. I prefer English. The second thing, you can choose Blender hot shortcuts, or you can choose industry compatible, which are, if you're coming from 3D Studio Max or Maya, you can choose this and it will convert your shortcuts from Maya to Blender. The next thing is how you want to select objects with left or right mouse button, and what the spacebar to do. You can choose between different themes, as you can see. I pretty much like the black one, but if you want, you can just experiment and just choose whatever you like. So that's it. How to close this window. Just click outside of the window and it will close itself, just like that. So in the next tutorial, we're gonna start learning Blender. Thank you for your time. Hello and welcome to this video. We're going to learn about Blender interface, and we're going to talk about just the panels, and we're going to ignore the viewport. What the viewport is, this is this big window where you see the cube. Here is where the magic happens. In the viewport, we're going to spend 95% of our time. Most of your work will be in the viewport, and the viewport contains all the 3D work, including meshes, lighting, camera, etc. But let's first start and show you how to resize different panels. So what panel is, at the bottom of the screen you can see this panel with some numbers. It is called a timeline. So if you want to resize your timeline, at the top you have a little thick line, and if you hover on it with your mouse, you can see the cursor image change, and you can drag upwards and downwards. So going up and going down is resizing this panel. And as you can see, this panel ends up with another panel. Those are two separate panels. The first one is called outliner, and the second one is a property panel. So if you want to resize them, you just need to select again this line, just have the cursor changed, and just drag left and right. The important thing here is that when you're resizing the outliner and the property panel, they resize at the same time because they're connected. They're in one big panel sheet. But if you want the outliner to have a little bit more space downwards, you can just select this middle line and just drag downwards and upwards. So this is the basic of how to resize your windows. So let's get a little bit more detailed about each of those panels. The outliner, I'm just gonna brief everything. We're gonna have a separate lessons on each panel where we're gonna talk about in depth about them. So this outliner basically holds everything that your scene has. So as you can see in my viewport, I have a cube, here it is. And in my outliner, I have in my hierarchy, I have the cube. You have the camera, you have the lightning, and you have a collection. So what collection is like a parent, and the camera, cube, and lightning is like a child. So this is like a big box containing everything, and as you can see, I can just collapse it and hide everything, show everything. So camera, cube, and lights are child of the collection. Imagine it like a group, like everything in the collection is a group of that collection. We're going to talk about the technical details and how to use collections and get more in depth about them uh, in a separate lesson. But basically, collections hold some items of different types. What this eye on the right side means is you can hide and unhide your items. So as you can see, this is my light over here. If I click on the eye icon, it disappears. If I click back again, it appears. And the and another thing about collections, you can hide and unhide all the objects inside the collection with just single click. So if I click this eye, everything in the collection is hidden. If I click it back, you can have everything back inside. So the next thing is the property panel. What the property panel holds is the different settings for different stuff. For example, this cube, if it has a height of 1, and in the properties panel you can go and change the height, you can change the position, you can change different parameters of it. You can also change the light intensity, the light angle, etc. So basically the properties channel contains all the parameters for each of Blender components. So it doesn't matter if it's a camera, cube, light, etc. Also, it holds a lot of different menus and options. We're gonna cover them in a separate lesson, but here in the properties panel, mainly you have all the important stuff that are represented for the objects. The next thing is the timeliner. The timeliner is basically used for animation. So you set different keyframes here, and the timeliner is working with frames. So as you can see, right now we have 250 frames. We'll have a separate lesson about the timeliner. I'm just gonna point out what it is, so don't worry about it. So basically, this is the timeliner, and if you click play, it's gonna start and play the animation, but right now we don't have any animation. You can set up the start position by just dragging here or just typing I want to start from frame number 5 and I want to end up at frame number 120. So the timeline just holds all the keyframes when you start to animate. All right, so let's continue with some of those here. The first thing, when you click on the file, from here you can create a new scene, a general, a 2D animation, a scene for sculpting, a scene for visual effects or video editing. From the second one, open, you can open a previous scene that you've already created. Open recent will show you a list of recent projects that you work on. You can have also a recovery from an autosave or recover the last session. You can save as or save as a copy. The next thing is link and append. Those two are very important. We're going to use them a lot, but I'm going to talk about them in a different video. So the next thing is import. From this tab, you can import different file formats in Blender. The next thing is export. Again, you can export different file formats from Blender, and you can clean up your scene. You can reset everything to factory settings, or you can quit Blender. The next thing is edit. In edit, you can undo, redo. You can have a list of everything that you've done, like a history. You can repeat the last action, just clicking the G key. You can repeat the history. You can adjust some last operations, or you can search for menus here. You can rename the active item. You can batch rename. This is renaming a lot of objects with a batching process. We're going to talk about this later. And the final thing, the preferences. This is very important tab. We're going to talk about it in a different lesson, but keep in mind that in preferences we're gonna spend some time here adding some scripts and adjusting the Blender and customizing it to our own needs. The next thing is the render tab. From here we're gonna render still images or animations, and in the window tab you can create a new window, a new Blender window. You can create a new main window, etc., but we're not gonna using this too much. And the last thing that we still didn't talk about is the layout, modeling, sculpting, UV, etc. But we're gonna cover those menus in different lessons because they need more attention and they need to be very in depth, because this is those are different modes where we can work on, and they do different stuff. Like for example, in the modeling you model the 3D model. In the sculpting you can sculpt the model. The UV editing will create our two-dimensional map in order to start the texture paint. And finally we're gonna start creating some shading, materials like metal, rust, wood, etc. Create your animation, render it, create a compositing on the rendering. And for advanced programmers, you can script some things, or even for some new programmers, you can script some things. So let's summarize this lesson. I've showed you how to move and how to scale your panels. I told you about the outliner, about the collections, that it contains different elements. I told you about the property settings, that you can here tweak the settings of each object. The next thing, the timeliner, where we're gonna animate and just play the animation and adjust it. The next thing, the file menu, where you can save, open, create new files, export some different formats. The edit menu, where you can undo actions, where you can click on the preference and start customizing your Blender. The rendering tab to render still images, animations. The window tab to toggle and create new Blender windows. And finally, from the help menu, you can click and go to the official Blender website and have some tutorial support right in the forums, etc. So thank you guys for watching this introduction part 1. I'm waiting you in the next one. Bye. Hello everyone and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to be talking about Blender modularity. As you can see right now we have 4 windows. This is my viewport where you see your 3D models, lighting, cameras, etc. Up here in the top right we have our outliner. Below it, we have our properties channel, and in the bottom, we can see our timeline over here. All right, so what is the same thing about all those windows? They all have the same button over here, but a different icon. As you can see, we have a grid with a ball, we have a list, we have like two switches, we have a clock, and those icons define which editor type is over here. So you can basically customize each of these panels to be a different panel. Let me show you how. So if you click on this icon, right now we are in 3D viewport. We can click on image editor, and right now our viewport become an image editor. Here you can edit images. If you click on the UV editor, it looks the same, but it's different. In the UV editor, you're going to be laying out a two-dimensional map of your 3D and create the textures over here. So let's continue on with the compositor. Just again, click here, click on compositor, and here this window will help us composite our image once we render it. Let me continue on. The texture node editor. From here you can edit your textures. The next thing is the shader editor. Here you can set up a pretty complex material. For example, if you want to create a metal, if you want to create a glass, if you want to create wood, etc. So from here you can create your materials for your objects. Let's move on. This is the video sequencer. It works just like Adobe Premiere or Final Cut. You can edit videos here, cut them, arrange them, etc. The next thing is the movie clip editor. In this movie clip editor, you can put, for example, a video that you shoot with your camera or your phone, it doesn't matter, and you can track the movement of the 2D images and place a 3D inside or create visual effects, maybe for short videos or for films. So here you can track 2D images and integrate 3D images in it. So this is about our general tabs that you can change. Let's move on with animations. From here, if you click, you're gonna be load up the dope sheet. Here you can have different keys when you animate and move them around. So the next thing after the dope sheet is our timeline. We already have one down there. Here you're placing your keyframes when you're animating. We're going to be covering this a little bit later. Let's move on. The graph editor. When you place different keys, those keys create curves, and those curves can be manipulated in order to create different motion. You can create ease in animations, ease out animations. So pretty much in the graph editor, we're going to be doing that. So let's move on to the driver window. If you click, it looks pretty much the same, but it's different. Here you're going to be creating a pretty complex animations. All right. The last one is the non-linear animation. It looks just like our timeline, but it's pretty much the same, but it has few additional options that we're going to be covering later on. So this is covering our animation, and let's move on to the scripting. Here is our text editor when you can create and write code. Here is your Python console. You can type different Python scripts over here, all right, for the programmers. And the next thing is the info. So here you have different information about how to access different stuff. So this is very useful if you're going to code. Moving on, we go to the outliner. Here you have your scene, lighting, your 3D meshes, your cameras, your collections, everything. We're going to be covering everything later on. The next thing is the properties. We already have a property panel over here, but you can duplicate it. The file browser, you can browse the files over here from your PC, or the preference. You can set up different interfaces and select the preference. You also can access the preference from edit, click the preference, and it will be in a floating window. So let me go back to my 3D viewport and let me close my preference. So this is how you can create modularity in your Blender. So why this is important? just check out here, guys. You have a layout, you have modeling, sculpting, UV editing, texture painting, shading, animation, rendering, compositing, and scripting. All these things are different layouts for the work that you are going to do. So if you are going to model, you click here, and as you can see, my layout changes. My layout changes because right now we are in the modeling process, and it changes because it is more useful to have it like that. If you go into the sculpting, you can access your sculpting tools from here, and as you can see, my layout focus on the properties of the brushes that we are going to use over here, and keeping my outliner over here. If we go to the UV editing, we have the UV editor here, so we can see our two-dimensional transition of the 3D over here and just lay out the UVs and cover them with the textures. Also, it keeps one panel to the edit mode and keeps the properties and the outliner. And if we're moving through all of those panels quickly, you see the texture paint have different layout. So the shading view is a little bit more complex and has many windows. Here you can see your 3D model. From here you can access your shader and tweak it up. And while you're tweaking your shader, your model will update in real time. So this is pretty handy. Here you have the image editor where you can see how the images, how the textures are manipulated. From here you can access your files on the computer. For example, if you have already created a complex shader, you can drag and drop it. You have your outliner and your properties, and this all applies for every window here. And this modularity is created with the mindset of how you can best utilize the different actions that you're doing. So for example, here in the scripting tab, you have the code over here, you have the console over here, and the 3D view, so you can preview what you're doing. So for example, if I click on new and start creating my variables, test one, etc., and I can run this piece of code and just see the result in the console. And the whole modularity here is created with the use case of the scripting. But you will ask how I have so many windows compared to the first layout when we have only 4 windows. All right, so this is again pretty handy trick that I'm going to show you how to create more windows out of the box. So you need to go to the edge of each window over here, and as you can see, my mouse will turn into a crosshair, and you just left click and drag to the left, and I'm just creating another window. All right, so we have now 2 viewports, and if I want this viewport to see from the top my model, so for example, if I'm modeling over here something and I want to see it how it looks from the top, you can pretty easily create that. But what if we want to see it from the side? Again, left click here, drag to down, and for example, let's click on X, and right now I'm seeing it from the side, and I'm just gonna arrange this a little bit like that. And now if I'm modeling here in the perspective view, I can see how my model is looking from the top and from the side. So this is pretty handy and pretty useful to create such modularity and just to create your best layout. So guys, if you want to close these windows, it's pretty easy. Go to the left corner and your mouse cursor will be turning into a crosshair again. Just left click and drag on top of the window above it. And as you can see, there will be an arrow, and from this arrow you can just click and release. The same goes for this window. Just drag from the top left corner to the left window and this window and just release, and you just closed this window. So this is pretty much about Blender modularity. It's pretty cool that they've integrated all this flexibility into the interface, and as you can see, you can create every imaginable scenario case that you want in Blender for your purposes. Thank you guys for watching this lecture, and I'm seeing you in the next one. Hello everyone, and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to be covering all the tools and the properties over here, So let's get started. The first one is our active tool. From this tool, you can change how you can select in your scene. So right now it's the default. We are not going to be using this tool at all. The default settings are working just great. But if you want to change your selection mode, you can access it from here. The next thing that is super important is the rendering properties. So when you click here, you can reveal all the rendering properties. So from the first thing, as you can see, you can choose your render engine. Right now we have three types of render engines. The first one is the Eve, the second one is the Workbench, and the third one is the Cycles. Most of the time I use Eve or Cycles. The Workbench, I don't use it. The next stuff that you can set up in the rendering properties are the sampling. The sampling is per pixel, so you can set up the rendering sampling. Right now by default is 64. You can increase this to get a high fidelity rendering, and this is about the viewport. The viewport should be lower because it can take a lot of time if you increase the sampling. The other options that you can access here are a lot of post-process effect like ambient occlusion, bloom. You can create depth of field of the camera. The subsurface scattering is mostly important for skin. You can have screen space refractions, motion blur, volumetrics. You can set up here in the performance your normals to be a high quality normals. You can access hair, shadows, indirect lighting, and so on. So basically this is your stack with a post-process effects that you can use once you start to rendering your scene. So from here you select your rendering engine, and from down there you select all the post-process effects that you want. The next thing is the output properties. So the output properties is connected with the rendering properties. From here you can set up the resolution of your image. So right now we are working in 1080p, but you can increase this or decrease this depending on what resolution you want to get. The next stuff here in the dimensions is the frame start, end, and step. This is connected with our timeline. See how our timeline is changing if I drag this down. So we are just changing the frames where your animation starts and where your animation ends. The next thing is you can set up a different frame rate. For example, if you're creating a movie that is 24 frames per second, or if you're working on a games which needs to support 60 FPS per second, you can change that. Or even if you're working on a game that needs 120 FPS, you can just select custom and boost it up. All right. We have other things like the output format. You can output in RGBA, in RGB, and you can change the file formats from here to export your rendering in different kind of formats. You can also export movies, etc. So moving on with the view layer properties. From view layer properties, you can select different render passes. You can select only the lighting from the diffuse channel or the color from the diffuse channel. This is a little bit complex and we're going to be covering this a little bit later, but in just few words what rendering passes is, imagine a picture, and this picture is constructed of different things. For example, first you have just plain color without lighting. Second, you have lighting. Third thing, you have different reflections on your surface. You have shadows, and how Blender works is it renders each of these things on a separate channel, and you can export those separate channels. And for example, if you're making a movie, you can import each of the render passes in Nuke, which is a program for composing. And in this program, you can change each of the paths. For example, you can saturate the colors, you can boost up a little bit the lighting, you can change the shadows. So from here, you can work with the rendering passes. All right. Moving on, we have the scene properties over here. And from here, you can change everything about your scene. You can change the default camera, you can change the background, you can change the export path, etc. So here you can find all the properties that you need for your scene. Keep in mind that you can have multiple scenes, and this is only working for the current scene. So the next step is the world properties. So keep in mind that the world properties are general. So again, the scenes can be multiple, but the world is only one. So from here, you can change different aspects of your world. All right, so here are your world properties, and here are your scene properties, which scene properties are working only for this current scene. The next super important thing is the object properties. From here, you can access all the properties for this object. Right now, our object, for example, is located on X, Y, and Z on 0 meters. If I start to change it, I'm start moving my object. But first you need to select your object, obviously. I select this object and I have different information for the lighting. So from here you can access different properties of your object. You can select the transform, you can change the relations, you can add to a new collection, create instancing. We're going to be covering each of these properties in our lecture, so don't worry about it. Just keep in mind that from the object properties, you can change the properties for the current object that you selected. All right, let me get everything back to normal. And the next super important thing that we're going to use is the modifier properties. So the modifier properties is one of the most important thing in Blender, and we are going to work here a lot of the time. So what it does, if you click over here at the drop down, you're gonna have a huge list of different properties, of different modifiers that we can apply to our object. So I'm not going to be covering in this lecture what each of these does, but we're going to be covering them in our course. But keep in mind that from here you can add different properties onto your mesh. So for example, I can add a screw property and I can change different properties about screws. I can add different modifier. For example, I can add mesh deformer. I can add UV wrapper. I can add weight normals, and all of the properties are stacking, and you can change them and shape your geometry by using all those modifiers. So from here you add your modifiers. We're going to be taking a lot of time working here, so keep in mind that this is one of the most important properties. So keep in mind that this modifier property appear only on geometry. If I select my lightning, it disappears because I cannot apply a modifier to a lightning. So let's move on to the next thing, which is the particle properties. From here, from the particle properties, we can create different effects like rain, like fur, like hair. You can create even dust, etc. And from this panel, we're going to be creating different effects for our scene. The next cool property is the physical properties. And here you can create very cool physical dynamics. For example, we're going to use this panel to create cloud simulation. We're going to be using this panel to create fluids, rigid bodies, some solid bodies. You can create different force fields, or you can just dynamically paint. So from here you can access your physics properties and simulate different behaviors. So moving on further with our constraint properties. From the constraint properties, you can create different constraints which are connected with some different objects. For example, you can copy a location of a different object. You can copy the rotation. You can copy the scale. You can also limit distance, which will restrict the movement to a certain distance. So keep in mind that when we work with constraints, we're going to be accessing it from here, and we're going to create relationships between objects using constraints. So the next important thing is the object data properties. You can access it from here, and the thing that we're going to use a lot is the vertex groups. What you can do here is you can select different vertices of your 3D mesh, create it as a group, and start modeling with, for example, with animations, those vertices, or with some forces. You can also do this to the shape keys. The shape keys are used to transform one object to another, which is in other 3D softwares called blend shapes, but here is shape keys. So from here you can access this, and we have a lot of different properties that we're going to be covering more in details in our further lectures. The next important thing is our material properties. You can access it from here. And as you can see over here, we have different properties of the material of our 3D object. So for example, you can change your shader from here. You can change your base color. Let me show you. I can change it to blue. You can change a lot of things about your material, but this is very familiar to one of the things that I've showed you in our previous lectures. So let me show you what it is. I'm going to change my timeline and I'm going to change it to shader editor, and keep a look here. If I start changing the roughness over here, it starts to change in our shader editor. So basically these material properties are our shader properties, and I oftenly don't access the material properties of the object from here because, as you can see, here is a little bit limited. Here we can create different connections to our shader, and you can change all the properties over here. So how I work is I don't access my material properties from here. I access them if I really need a very quick change. But if I'm working on my material to create my final materials and I need to create different shader networks and change a lot of the values, I oftenly work in my shader editor, which you can access from here. So let me go back and turn this into my timeline. All right. And the final thing that we are not going to be using at all is the texture properties. From here, this is a tool that was designed for older versions of Blender, and you can change different things about your textures, but we are not going to be using this much in our lectures. So this is pretty much covering all the things that you want to know in the interface section. And I think we're pretty much done. We've explained everything about our interface, how you can change everything, how you can access everything. We discuss all the properties over here. Just briefly, of course, we're going to be covering them in details very much in our next lectures. And I think we are ready to start with our viewport in our next lectures. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm waiting you in my next one. Hello and welcome back with my next lecture. In this lecture, we're going to talk about the viewport, that big thing in the middle of Blender where we're going to spend 90% of the time. So let's get started. As you can see right now, we have the cube, we have a camera and a light. Simple as that, 3 objects. The first thing that I want to show you is how to select an object. To select an object, just simply left click on it, just like that. And you can see that there is an orange outline around the object. So this orange outline indicates which objects are selected in our viewport in Blender. Right now, I just selected my cube, but if I want to select all my objects, I can left click and drag, just like in Windows, and release, and I've selected all my objects. As you can see, all the objects are turned into an orange color. Just our 3D has this orange outline because it's a 3D mesh. The others are just gizmos. So the next thing is how to select object one by one. Let me show you. I'm just clicking outside of the objects so I can deselect them. And if I want to select just my cube and my camera, I first click on my cube, then hold Shift on my keyboard and click on the camera. And right now, as you can see in my outliner, in that blue rectangles, we have the camera and the cube selected and the light is not selected. If I want to select my light, just hold Shift, click on the light, and as you can see, the indication in my outliner shows that all the 3 objects are selected. And this more white bluish color shows which object is selected last. So if I want to deselect my light right now from the group, I just hold the Shift key again and it will work in reverse. The last time I hold my Shift key and click on my light, I select it. And now if I do the same, I'm going to deselect it. I'm just going to click on my light, just like that. And as you can see in my outliner, it's deselected. So right now, there is no last selected object. So if I want to deselect my cube, I first need to hold Shift and click on my cube, and it will last select my cube. As you can see here in the outliner, it's still not deselected my cube. To deselect it, I need to hold Shift again and click again on the cube. So right now we've clicked two times with the shift. So the first time was to select it as a last selected object, and the second time was to deselect it. All right, so this is pretty much how you can select objects in your viewport. Of course, you can select them from the outliner, just clicking right here. So this covers the selection process in our outliner. Right now, my Blender is selected to use the Blender hotkeys in the viewport. So first, we're going to talk about how to navigate in Blender with the Blender keys. So it's pretty simple. The first thing you need to do is, if you click on your middle mouse button like that and start moving your mouse left or right, you're going to start rotating around the objects in the viewport, as you can see. So if I want to zoom, I'll just rotate my mouse wheel forward and I'm zooming, and I'm start rotating it back and I'm zooming out. So using my mouse wheel, my middle mouse button, forward and back, I'm just zooming in and zooming out. If I press the middle mouse button, I'm rotating. And the last thing that you need to know is how to pan, how to move away from that cube. So how to do this? Hold Shift on your keyboard, and again with the middle mouse button pressed, start to move away from the cube. Just press it and drag your mouse away from the cube. So as you can see, you can pan with it. And if you start combining all the keys that I've told you about, let's say I just rotate, I pan a little bit, I zoom, I pan, I rotate. So those are the Blender hotkeys. So pressing the middle mouse button will rotate around the object. Moving the mouse wheel forward and backward will zoom. And holding Shift and pressing the middle mouse button will just move the camera. You're gonna pan around the objects. But I actually don't use the Blender hotkeys. And why I'm doing this is because I work in the game development industry, where we need to use more packages and not just Blender. So for example, if I'm going to animate, I animate in Maya. If I'm going to texture, I'm gonna texture in Substance Painter. If I'm using game engines, I use Unreal or Unity. So all those packages that I've mentioned are using different hotkeys than Blender. So for example, if you work even in animation industry or different industry that needs and require more packages, not just Blender, you're gonna need to set up your interface to work with the industry standard hotkeys. So how to do that? Go to Edit, click on Preference, go to Key Map from here, and from this drop-down menu, right now we are using the Blender hotkeys. And what I'm using is industry compatible, because as I told you, I'm using Maya, Substance Painter, Unity, Unreal, and more programs that are working with industry compatible hotkeys. And this is essential thing for my workflow, all the viewports to work with the same hotkeys. Because for example, if I'm animating in Maya and I want to fix some 3D modeling in Blender, if Maya is different than Blender, the hotkeys, I'm gonna get confused, and I want my Blender keys to be exactly like my Maya keys and my Unity or Unreal Engine hotkeys. So I'm just gonna choose the industry compatible keys. All right, and the next thing that I will set up is I'm gonna go to navigation and I'm gonna click on invert zoom direction, and I'm gonna choose the mouse. So right now we are working with industry compatible hotkeys, and I'm going to show you the new hotkeys on how to zoom, pan, and navigate in the viewport. The first thing is how to rotate around the cube. With the industry compatible hotkeys, you're going to need to hold the Alt key on your keyboard, and by clicking my left mouse button, I'm going to start and rotate around my cube. As you can see, I'm just rotating around my cube, holding Alt key and clicking the left mouse button. The next thing is holding my Alt key and holding my right mouse button. I'm gonna zoom in and I'm gonna zoom out. All right, using again holding the Alt key and the right mouse button, zoom in and zoom out. So right now with just holding my Alt key and just clicking my left and my right mouse button, I can simply rotate and zoom, rotate and zoom. And how to pen? Pretty easily. Still hold the Alt key and click your middle mouse button. And in this way, I'm just holding my Alt key on my keyboard and I'm just shift changing from my left mouse button to my right mouse button to my middle mouse button. And as you can see, it's pretty easy, pretty intuitive to work like that, holding Alt key and using the 3 mouse buttons. So again, to summarize, holding Alt key, right mouse button to zoom, left mouse button to rotate, and the middle mouse button to pen. It's pretty easy. All the engines, and as I told you, Maya and Substance Painter are using those hotkeys, so I pretty much recommend for you to use those hotkeys if you want to work in the industry and not get confused from jumping from one software to another software. If you are comfortable with only the Blender hotkeys, you feel free to use them. I've already shown you. Thank you guys for watching this part of the tutorial series, and I'm waiting you in my next one. Hello and welcome back to the next lecture. In this lecture, we're going to talk about the transformations, or how to move, rotate, and scale your object. So let's get started. The first thing that I need to do is I need to be in the select mode here, the select box. I'm going to select this cube, just left click on it, and how to move, rotate, and scale it. By clicking 4 on your keyboard, you're going to go to the object mode. Remember that I'm using the industry compatible keys from here, key map industry compatible. And as you can see, if I switch to Blender, the hotkeys are different. It's not 4 on your keyboard. So the hotkeys are a little bit different in the industry compatible, but this will work, for example, like in Maya, in Max, etc. So I prefer using this as I'm working in the industry. So the next thing is here, from here, if you click on those 4 arrows while you select your object, so first go select it, then click on the 4 arrows, and as you can see, a gizmo appear. So what it does, the red is X, the green is Y, and the blue is Z. It's a bit different in the other 3D packages like Maya and Max. The Y-axis is up, but here the Z-axis is up. That's the difference between Blender and the other packages. So right now the arrows of the gizmo are pointing to the positive values. For example, if I click on this handle, just left click on it and start to drag, I'm moving my cube in the positive X. And as you can see here in the transformation under the object property tab, you can see that we've moved our object 4 meters, 0.45. All right. So right now I'm in the positive. If I left click and drag my object, I'm going into the negative. And as you can see, my X right now is -8. You can also put a number here. For example, if I want to move it 2 meters in the positive axis, I'll just put 2, or just put 4, or just put this 0 to center it. The next thing, if I drag the green one, I'm moving positive Y, negative Y. If I move the blue one, I'm going into the Z positive and Z negative. Pretty straightforward. If I select the middle white circle, I can move my cube freely in all the 3 axes. As you can see in my transform, I'm moving my cube on all the axes. So if you select this, you're going to move it on all the axes. So if I click on the blue little square over here, I will move my cube on 2 axes. As you can see, I'm just moving it on X and Y, and I'm not pushing it upwards. So it's not going up right now. However, if I select the green, I can push it on X and Z, but I cannot slide it to Y. So if I select this one, I'm not moving to Y, so I'm not going left or right if this is my right and this is my left. All right, so by selecting those cubes, you can move it freely on two axes. The next thing that is showing you where the negative and the positive is up here, this gizmo. So as you can see, where you have a line, it's showing that the positive value is over here, and when you have only a dot, it's showing that this is the negative value. So while you are rotating, you can always take a look here and just see where is the positive and where is the negative. Let's move forward with the rotation. So if I click on the second one, this is the rotate, our gizmo change, and as you can see, there are full circle like an axis. So if I start dragging on this axis, I'm start rotating my cube on X. If I start on dragging on this axis, I'm rotating my cube on Z, and of course on the green axis you can rotate it on the Y. All right, pretty simple, it's just the same. And if you select the white one, you can rotate on all axes. Again, check my transformation on the right, how I'm rotating on all the axes, just like that, just like that. And as you can see, we have pretty messed up cube. So I'm gonna zero it. Again, from here you can just drag and increase the rotation, or you can just put a number for the degrees. All right, pretty simple. Let's move on. The third thing is the scale. So from here I can scale on this axis, I can scale on this one, I can shrink it in the matter of height, or I can just select the white circle and start scaling on all the three axes uniformly, just like that. All right, pretty cool. So if I want to create a shape, maybe something like this, a rectangle, pretty easy, pretty simple. If I want to create a height out of it, again, pretty easy and simple. Again, those two will work on two axes, the little boxes that I told you. Here, if I select this one, you can see that we are scaling on two axes, on the X and Y. So pretty simple, guys, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And the fourth one, this is a gizmo with all the transformation. So in this one you have the move, you have the scale, you have the rotate. So with this one you can pretty much do all the operations but with one gizmo. I truly never use this, I only use those. So it's pretty straightforward for me. Let me just bring back everything. It's pretty straightforward for me just to switch. So for example, if I want to move, I'm just going to start moving, and if I want to rotate, I'm going to rotate. If I want to scale, I'm just going to start scaling, just like that, just like that. So let me show you the hotkeys, guys. So the move, let me just hover it. So the move, the short key is W. For the rotate, the short key is E on your keyboard, and for the scale is R. So if I click W on my keyboard, right now I'm going to move. If I click E key on my keyboard, I'm going to rotate, and if I click R, I'm going to scale. So I highly encourage you guys to take your time, practice the hotkeys, practice the scale, the move, and the rotate, so you can master it. Let me show you a little introduction on how comfortable you need to be in Blender in order to work freely. So for example, if I want to move this cube, I'm going to move it, make it here, I'm going to shrink it down, I'm going to rotate like that, I'm going to duplicate it, I'm going to rotate like that, I'm going to move it like that, I'm going to shift select, maybe I'm going to scale them, I'm going to move them, just like that. So pretty easy. I've made something like a little roof for a house, and maybe one more duplicate. I'm gonna locate it here. I'm gonna set the rotation to 0. I'm gonna make it like that. I'm gonna move it. I'm gonna scale it. I'm gonna shrink it down. As you can see, I've created pretty fast this shape, and this is because I'm pretty comfortable with my hotkeys. So I highly encourage you guys to take your time and learn those three actions, as those three actions will be like 90% of the time used, and you need to be very comfortable in 3D. All right, guys, thank you for tuning in. I'm waiting you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome back to the next lecture. In this lecture, I'm going to show you few tricks on how to move, rotate, and scale your object in a different way. So let's get started. I'm going to choose my move, so I'm going to press W on my keyboard. So watch now closely. If I start to move on my x-axis, see here at the bottom, you have X, Y, and Z axis. And if I press Y on my keyboard, I just press Y, I automatically snap my 3D objects to only move on the Y axis, as you can see. And there is one more pretty cool thing. If I click on my keyboard 5, it will move my 3D objects 5 meters from the center. So as you can see, the center is where the green and the red line are crossing. And I just moved my cube 5 meters in positive direction. So I just move my cube in 5 meters in the positive direction. So if I click backspace and click -5, I'm moving my cube -5. As you can see, here is a formula. And if I delete, I'm start deleting the numbers. If I put, for example, 12, as you can see in my formula, I added 12. So let's delete this one. It is right now in the center. So right now I'm gonna release, and I'm gonna click again and press Z on my keyboard. And as you can see, I'm just moving on the Z axis. If I press X, I'm gonna move on the X axis. If I press Y, I'm gonna move on the Y axis. So this is pretty handy way to move your cube only in this direction if you want to. So for example, if I move it over here, I want to start moving it, but I press Y. I'm going to move the cube only in this Y direction on the place that the cube was. So let me show you another example. If I move it over here, I start to move it and I press X. I'm moving on X. If I press Z, I'm moving a little bit on Z. Here on X, here on Z, here on Y. As you can see, pretty handy, and this works for everything. If I want to rotate on X, as you can see, I press only X. I can press Z, I can rotate on Z. I can press Y, I can rotate on Y. Again, jumping from mode to mode. This is pretty handy. And let me show you the scale. Again, start scaling, press Z, press X, press Y, and you're scaling on this direction. Pretty cool. And if I type 4, I just put 4 to my cube. If I delete it, press enter, I'm gonna finish it. So pretty handy, guys. Let me just put everything to 0, and let's summarize pretty quickly. So this is important. I often use these hotkeys. So again, just start to create your movement and then click X, Z, or Y. That's pretty much it. And you can move on those axes from the position of your cube. For example, my cube is here. Start to move, press Z. I'm moving from this point, all right? Not from the center, but from this point. And if I put like 5 meters, it will move my cube 5 meters from the location that I started to move my cube. All right, so this is pretty much for this small tip. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'm waiting you in the next lecture. Bye. Hello and welcome back with the next chapter of our Blender Masterclass. In this lecture, I'm going to be covering how to add objects in Blender. So let's get started. There are two ways of adding objects. The first one is you can go here at the add object, click on it, and you can find a lot of menus over here. So if you go to the mesh and we click on UV sphere, you can see that we've added a sphere in our outliner. Here, there is a sphere, and you can see an orange outline inside our box. What this tells us is that inside of this box, there is a sphere that we've created. If I click on my cube, the sphere is not visible, but when I select my sphere again, I can see that the sphere is inside my cube. So I'm going to move it aside, and as you can see, we've added a sphere. Let's go again here. Let's add another cube. All right, let's go again here. You can add a cone. So from this menu, you can add different objects. We can even add the monkey, which is iconic model for the Blender. So going here, mesh, let's try the torus. As you can see, we've added a lot of different objects over here from this menu. So the second method, how to add objects to your scene, it's a little bit more complicated because I'm using the industry compatible keys, but I'm going to show you how to bind it. So if I go to edit preference, and if I select Blender hotkeys, so I'm right now switching the hotkeys, and if I click Shift and A on my keyboard, this menu, this one, will pop out everywhere inside my scene where my cursor is. So for example, if I'm modeling and I need a quick object to be added to my scene, I simply click Shift A, go to Mesh, I've added a plane. All right, Shift A, go to Mesh, I've added a cylinder, etc. So this is how you can quickly add objects, not going here, you know, from this menu, but everywhere in your viewport. But this key is not binded into industry compatible keys. So what you need to do is we're going to copy the key and we're going to insert it into our industry compatible keys. So how to do that? Go to the key bindings and type Shift A. So here I'm searching this Shift and A hotkey. What is binded to? So let me search a little bit. So here it is. It's the object mode, add, and this script, this one is calling this menu. So I'm just going to select this text, click Ctrl C on my keyboard, go to the industry compatible keys, and now I'm going to open the 3D view, object mode, global. I'm going to go all the way down. So from here, if I click add new, it's going to add a new key bind. So what I need to do is I need to paste the function that I've copied. I need to click on Shift, so it's activated with Shift and A. And here you see the hotkey is Shift and A. But one more thing that is missed is the naming. I'm gonna go back to my Blender keys, type Shift A, and I'm gonna search for the name function, object mode, open this, add, and you can see the name view 3D underscore empty underscore add. I'm gonna again Control C, go to my industry compatible keys, and in the naming for my call menu, I'm gonna paste this. I'm gonna hit enter and I'm gonna close. And right now I'm working with my industry compatible hotkeys, and if I click Shift A, I got this menu. So you can do pretty much every of the menus inside the Blender hotkeys and bind them to your industry compatible keys. It's not a problem. This is the method how you can add them. So right now I have this Shift and A, and I can freely add objects over here, no problem, just like that. Again, Shift A, maybe I can add a torus, I can move it, I can scale it. All right, we have that. The next thing that I want to show you is how you can delete the objects from the scene. It's pretty easy. You just select the object, hit delete key on your keyboard, or select the other object and click backspace on your keyboard, and you just delete it. And if you made a mistake, you can always press Ctrl Z to go back and fix this mistake that you've made. If you delete something by accident or something like that, you can always go back and click Ctrl Z. So this is pretty much for this lecture. Super easy to add objects. I show you how to bind the keys. You can bind everything from the Blender hotkeys just go to edit, to preference. For example, if I want to search what is linked to, for example, X or shift and X, you can find all the keys that are binded to shift and X. And if you want to copy something, you just copy this information, add it into the industry compatible graph, where is the clip graph editor, in the same place, and just bind it with the same hotkey, and it will work just like a charm. So this is pretty much for this lecture, guys. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learn something, and we're gonna move on with the next one. Thank you for tuning in. Bye.